Hello, hello. I can see we have one or two people already joined. Finn, the other panelist, will be joining pretty soon. Here we go. Hey, Finn.
I'm here. Sorry for the wait, mate.
No worries. We've got a couple of people on already. I thought there was like a practice room that you do, but I couldn't see where to start that. So we're right in at the deep end.
Okay. Well, that's how I work best.
Yeah.
I
So
haven't even seen the
the
slides yet. So what I'll do is I'm going to let you lead and say, Finn, talk about this or that.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. Well, the sort of positioning stuff is up first. So
Okay.
I'll screen share and there's only a couple of slides for positioning anyway, and you can just tell me when you want to go into the second one and then onwards.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And I'll wait until we're maybe 2 or 3 minutes past and then we'll get into everything.
Cool, cool. How you doing this morning? You all right? Or it's not your morning, sorry. How you doing your time?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I'm trying to, do the thing of having minimal meetings and on
Yeah.
a Tuesday and a Thursday um and then more meetings on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So
Yeah,
naturally
you mentioned.
it's
Yeah.
been more relaxed, which is nice.
Good, good.
Yeah. So hello everyone that's attending so far. Thanks for joining. Um when you put something in the chat, I think it's set up so that it goes just directly to us, but I'm not entirely sure. This is certainly my first time hosting a Zoom webinar, so if there are any technical mishaps, then my bad for that, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And of course, this is recorded, so we'll be posting it to YouTube at some point fairly soon. Really as soon as we have the recording. So if there's anything that you miss, you can always go back onto that. Uh, yeah, and there will be a few people that will have registered and won't be watching it live. They'll get the recording, I think, emailed to them afterwards. So if you need to drop off for any reason, then you can always come back to it at a later time. And what we're planning to do is, since this is our first webinar, we want to make it absolutely packed with value. So we'll go for an hour, hopefully maybe say 45 minutes of like going into stuff, practical stuff that you can use, the things that we recommend, how to do certain things, and then maybe 15 minutes or so of Q&A. So if at any time you want to send messages, they will come through to them and we will answer them. We'll probably answer them at the end so that we're not constantly stopping and starting. But yeah, feel free to give us any questions at all in the chat, and we will answer them. Anything you want to go into, Finn, before we get started? We're up at nearly 20 people, and I think
Yeah, yeah.
there'll be a few
No, thank you,
more.
everybody. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We know your time is valuable, so we want to make this as informative and valuable as possible. I've just kind of come in off rush hour in the US, so as you can probably tell by our accents, we're both from Scotland originally. I'm based just south of Edinburgh, but today I'm in Nashua, New Hampshire, and what's really cool about the fractional um, executive side of things is having the flexibility to travel and live life on your own terms and that kind of thing as well. Um, so yeah, I'm excited to get into this. I've been doing this will be my 11th year of working as a fractional executive. So um, this is a very informal and, let's say, realistic session in that, it's not scripted or staged or anything like that. And the biggest thing is the AI cannot replicate this at all. So what you're getting is real, practical knowledge, expertise, and experience. And hopefully you can take away some things today. that's going to benefit you going forward.
Yeah. And we'll be planning to do probably about two of these per month as well. Of course, this one is going into a bunch of different things. So we'll cover positioning, targeting and prospecting, writing messages to go out to people, plus offers and sales process. So five different aspects, all of which super important across the kind of range of how to sign clients. But obviously, future ones will be a little bit more specialized into certain areas, you know. So if there's anything that you want to go deeper into, or you would love to see another webinar for, then let us know, and we'll definitely keep that in mind and probably do one in the future.
And if anybody does have any questions as we go along, there is a Q&A feature as part of this webinar, so it is anonymous, and feel free to leave any questions for Stuart and I, and we'll pick up on them when we can. And like Stuart says, if there's anything that's deserves going into a little bit more depth, what we can maybe do is include it in a future webinar.
Yeah. So we'll give it one more minute or so before we get right into the the slides. We'll do some slide stuff. We don't want to make it too slide heavy. We want to make it as practical as possible. That's why you can, of course, ask questions throughout. We'll also screen share a software that we recommend for how to find the exact right type of prospects. Some of you might be familiar with Clay already, especially if you're in the marketing or sales side of a business. So we'll show a little bit of that and how you can, utilize that to find your best fit clients. So, we get started, Finn? I will share screen right now.
Yeah, let's do it.
There we go. So, as discussed, how to land three fractional roles in 90 days. That is something we've done multiple times before. It's not our average result. Like when someone works with us, it's not, it's far from every time we get them three roles in 90 days. That would be awesome if we could. But it is something that we've done before, and it's kind of the ideal. And with the right kind of setup, experience, process, everything, it is totally doable. So in this, we're going to cover how we recommend you do that, how we have done that, so that you can take some stuff from this, both strategic stuff that you can use over years, and also tactical stuff you can get started with today to sign more, better, and higher paying clients. So we'll begin with positioning, which is kind of the crux of everything. Finn, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So positioning, I find, is one of the most misunderstood and overlooked parts of the whole process. And what I really want to distill is, first of all, to understand what is good positioning. Um, Positioning, if we want to measure it like a metric point of view, is relevance. Okay, so that's going to be how relevant your positioning is in relation to a specific, part of the market, a specific problem that's solved. All of these things are going to really kind of dial in your positioning. There's multiple factors in here, and I've kind of distilled it down to, three things. If you can focus on these things alone, is really going to put you ahead of 90% of the market. All right. So, um, first of all, we've got, the market itself. So which industry that you focus on, where you choose to niche or niche down on. The other part is the messaging. So how is your message different from your competitors, right? The third one, which is really, really important, and there's some good examples of how to use this and really kind of productizing your offer or your methods of how you get from a specific problem to a specific result is going to be a really, really kind of good differentiator. And there's a few good examples here. Like if I think of Airbnb, for example, like they weren't first to the accommodation game, if you like. People had a plethora of options when it came to getting accommodation somewhere. What this did was it actually created a marketplace in that it allowed homeowners to, rent out their home and that kind of thing, but it also allowed for more flexible ways of getting access to entire homes and things as opposed to just being hotel rooms or standard B&Bs and that kind of thing. What's kind of cool about that story as well is that actually kind of that company came about from two guys that used to rent out two blow up mattresses in the spare room. Right, that's how the whole concept of Airbnb came about. But that's by the by. The other one is Uber. Like, so the taxi game wasn't new when Uber came along. What they actually did was just make it much more convenient and safe for people to actually get from A to B. Right, so the methods, the way in which they get from the problem they solve through to the product or the solution, that methodology is what differentiates them from the rest of the competition, right? So if we think about the rest of the competition in terms of Uber, for example, everything else that is similar to Uber is very, very kind of it's haphazard in terms of, for example, if you want to flag down a taxi in New York or London or that kind of thing, you've got to wait for a taxi to actually kind of go past you, right? That's the old way in which, we used to do things. Your method is, and this is a really kind of core insight here, is that your method should show the new way of doing something, which is perhaps faster, more convenient, more streamlined, has less risk than the old way of doing things. All right. And that's a really, really good thing to think about. So rather than focus on, just being a specialist in the market or differentiating your message, when you really focus on the method, that's how you deliver your special sauce, your expertise, the things that you do. That's the thing that's going to inform your messaging. That's the thing that's also going to be specific to the market as well. So I would implore you to work from the method back the way. This isn't just a theory thing. This is tactical implementation. Your method is going to determine what the rest of your positioning looks like. All right. So what's kind of core and key here is the way in which you do things. So you maybe do different things for different people, like on a consulting style basis. All right. But you will find that there's things that you do over and over again or a certain way, which if you distill that into a process, there might be some visuals that you put around it. It's much easier to explain what working with you looks like because you've actually got a visual representation of what it looks like as opposed to if somebody asks you what does working with you look like, a lot of people just start reeling off all the things that they know, all the things that they can do, and that dilutes the perceived value in what it is that you're doing. All right. So I like to call this propositioning made simple. Focus on these three things and your results. Your positioning is really your trajectory of what is going to come next. Okay, really, really important. Without good positioning, everything else becomes much, much harder. All right, Stuart, if you can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is what happens when you get great positioning. Okay, is you know, the more kind of the smaller the market that you're in, we want to get you to a point where it's like you're a market of one. You're the only obvious choice to a specific um audience, right? Or to a specific ICP, ideal client profile. Okay. Now the thing is that a lot of people start very broad and very wide. Okay. The thing is that if you're trying to market to everybody, you're marketing to nobody, right? And that's the thing is that the more kind of commoditized even content becomes, the more depersonalized it seems. All right. So with the advent of AI, um, you know, a lot of information that you see on LinkedIn is going to start sounding the same because it's, ChatGPT or, Claude or what have you, which is generating the same content for everybody, right? Um, and that's the thing is that the more specific you can be, and this comes back to your positioning, your market messaging, and your method, the more that you can speak to your target customer. All right. And that's the really, really kind of core part of this is the personalization, the specificity. That's what's going to set you apart. Okay. So another good thing to think about when it comes to your positioning is what can they get from you that they can't get anywhere else? Okay. And then articulate that in a clear and compelling way so your future clients can see that clear path. So I'm looking at the top there. It says messaging. What's actually supposed to be there is momentum. All right. You want to get that traction first. Turning that into momentum is when you have That really, really focused market kind of ownership, if you like. All right. So the first thing that comes is clarity. Where you have clarity, you're going to have focus, and then that's going to turn into momentum. All right. So hope that's useful. Happy to answer any questions that we can see about positioning, because like I say, it's the most misunderstood concept. All right. But once you do it really, really well, and this is actually something that, we do at fractional clients in a lot of depth, is going into your background, what opportunities are available in the market and tying those two things together. Because once you have that product market fit, it makes everything afterwards become that much easier. When people don't have good positioning, what really happens is they spend a lot of time kind of treading water, you know, and that looks like trying to strike up conversations and being overlooked or being ignored, you know, and that's really, really difficult as well because, it almost like it feels like it's like pre-rejection. All right. And the thing is, it's got nothing to do with you. It's got everything to do with how you articulate what you do. All right. If you nail your positioning down, then everything becomes much, much easier.
Yeah. Um, quick chat break. Someone said the chat has been disabled. I think the chat function has been, but the Q&A part doesn't. I'm not or hasn't. I'm not sure exactly what the buttons say on your screen, but there should be something to do with Q&A. So that's where you can send us whatever you want. And for the person that asked if you have to leave early, will you send a recording later today? Hopefully it will be today. If it's not today, it will be tomorrow. You'll get it soon though, one way or another. So there you go. Um, one thing I want to say on the question of positioning as well, having broad positioning or having really niche positioning can be a blessing or a curse depending on what stage you're at. And so my thought is, well, the blessing side of it is the people that see your sort of messaging. Let's say in your headline on LinkedIn, it's something like, I help Series A fintech companies in the UK that struggle with XYZ problem. That's a really, really, niche thing. So it means everyone that sees that is part of that, well, you are now the clear option for them because, you are more niched down to them than anyone else. Great. But it also means most of the people that see your LinkedIn aren't going to relate to that and therefore aren't going to be interested. So my sort of theory with that is the more you're starting out, or I guess maybe you could say the more you're struggling, even basically the less clients you have, the more you're going to benefit from becoming more niche, because if you're just getting started, you're not looking for the first 10 clients, you're looking for the first one or two or three. So the more niche, the better. And then over time, as you're getting traction, then that's when you might have to open it up a little bit more, which is the best way to do it. Because if you start broad, it's just harder to get that initial traction, you know? So that would be my recommendation, if that makes sense. One or two
Absolutely.
questions on positioning there that I'll redirect to you, Finn. Uh,
Sure.
what if you want to break into a new industry without the experience, but you have experience in other industries? So how do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
break into an industry you don't have experience in, let's say?
So that's an excellent question that kind of segues from what Stuart was saying there is, and I like to call it the tower strategy, is building towers. Okay. So Stuart mentioned, if you're starting out, it's easier to niche or focus on a specific niche first before going broad because um, when you go broad, then everything becomes more generalized. All right. Um, and the thing is, as well, is that, a lot of companies, so for example, Amazon, for example, they actually started off selling books online. I don't know if anybody remembers, but they were a book company before they started breaking into e-commerce and that kind of thing, right? So a really, really good approach to the tower strategy. But to answer Sam's question directly, if you want to break into a new industry, um, without the experience, but have experience in other industries, that's absolutely fine. And it's actually very, very innovative to do that because what we're talking about there is transferred learning. And that's where a lot of idea synthesis occurs because what you're actually doing is you're applying a way of thinking that is relevant to one industry with another. And that's where you get a lot of innovation and that's where you tend to stand out. All right. So going back to what I mentioned about the method side of things, the better that you can articulate your method of doing things, and it can be, I've taken this way or this strategy from this industry and I'm applying it to this one and it produces this result. It's a very, very innovative way. And what it does is it gets people interested in, or not just interested, but curious, right? What does that look like? I wonder what happens when you apply this thinking, this strategy from this industry here in my industry, for example. All right. And that's where you generally get, if you think about it like cooking, it's like different recipes. I wonder what happens if we put this and this together that generally don't go together. Sometimes, you can come across results that are superior to anything that anybody's ever seen before. So, Sam, hopefully that answers your question. And what I would implore you to do if you do have that kind of knowledge in a specific industry, and want to apply it to another one, you go forward with that as opposed to seeing it as it's not the traditional way of doing things. The truth of the matter is that if you just stick to the traditional way of doing things, you'll always end up with the same results as we've always had before. The great thing about living right now is that the amount of opportunity that we actually have to develop new markets, to develop new relationships and that kind of thing, the one thing that really differentiates you from everybody else is your knowledge and your experience. All right. That's the one thing that they can't get anywhere else. So it's down to you to best articulate that so that people know what they're getting and what they can't get from anybody else. Okay. I see Irina has a question here. Do you have good examples of strong positioning? So the one that I like to use, so Airbnb mentioned before, Uber. Another one is Porsche, for example. Everybody knows the Porsche 911, right? It's the most impractical car if you have a family, for example, right? But if you want the car as a driver, like Porsche 911 is going to rank up there as one of the most sought after cars, right? Because it's classic, it's sporty, but it's also there's a kind of um, what's the words? Exclusiveness about owning a car like that. All right. So that's a good example of strong positioning. It's like, how do you actually get Porsche positioning where you're going to deter the majority of every other market, but you're going to attract a very specific market who values quality, who values the experience of driving. That would probably be a good example there.
Yeah. Problem with the Porsche 911 is it's rear-engined instead of mid-engined, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and that's the thing as well is and that importantly kind of feeds back to the way in which you do things might be not great for like so I'll create an example. If you work specifically with startup phase companies or between say Series A and Series B, what you're doing there isn't going to be relevant to somebody who's at seed stage, right? Just like it's not going to be relevant to an enterprise level company, right? But that's actually good because you're going to disqualify people that aren't going to work with you. Okay, so even if the value is in the eye of the beholder, all right. If you try and pitch something which is irrelevant to a specific market, of course it's not going to work. That there are some pros to having um, some of the attributes of a Porsche.
yeah. Cool. I'm conscious of time, so let's move on. We have one or two more questions and we will come back to them, we promise. So following on from positioning, there's targeting. So from positioning, you should probably have a sense of who do you want to actually, you know, be contacting and bringing in as leads. So how do you do that? There's different databases. In terms of lead gen, if you want to call it that, your own warm outreach is going to be best. You know, like the people that already know you, the people that they can refer you to, you've already got that thing of, they know you, they like you, they trust you. Like your warm contacts are always going to be the best first step. But then to add fuel to the fire is going to be cold outreach. Posting content is great, but to be honest, it can be really hard to get results with it, to be honest. So with Sales Nav, which probably a lot of you already have, that's decent if you want to prospect manually. The problem with automated prospecting with Sales Nav is it works so terribly that you're going to get so many prospects outside of what you're looking for. Like you're going to put in a filter for, software as the industry, and then you're going to get someone that works exclusively in manufacturing. It just doesn't work properly, to be honest. So that's fine if you're doing it manually and you can just weed out the bad fits. Or if you're using some sort of automation where you get the list of prospects and run it through, like, for example, Claude API and say, does this fit my market or not? But that's a little bit more complicated. So I generally wouldn't recommend LinkedIn Sales Navigator unless you're doing it manually. Crunchbase is okay. Apollo is reasonable, but Clay is the best because you're kind of getting everything in one. Um, I'd be interested if I'd be interested to know how many people use Clay or have heard of it. So feel free to put in the chat if you've heard of it or you've never heard of it or you use it or anything like that. And in the meantime, maybe you can read out the answers to me, Finn. But in the meantime, I want to show you a bit about how it works. So you can sign up for free and use the free plan to just play around with it, get a feel for it. If you click on Find Leads up here and then Clay as the quick start, then you start with kind of, creating your table. You can use the sculptor, which is really cool because you basically just ask it what you're looking for, and then it plays around with the tools and the filters on its own. You get tons of stuff in terms of like funding, revenue, company size, industries to include, employee count. Um, yeah, if you've ever used Apollo, or even if you've used SalesNav, there's a lot of similar things here. So let's do something basic. Let's do that, and then let's do if we do software development, and then let's limit it to say 30 results. The reason you might want to limit it is because once you export from here, which I'm going to do, then that's when you can run more complicated filters and stuff. And that's when it starts to cost credits. So obviously, depending on the plan you use, that's where you get a set amount of credits, and then it costs to use the credits. So there's things like these. Obviously, it shows you how much it costs per credit. I can't remember how much one credit costs exactly, but if you want to use Clay, I'm sure you're able to figure that out on your own. And there's a lot of AI tools you can use as well. So if I click that, it will generate a column on the right where it will kind of tell me, in this example, about the company's ICP. And of course, it's an AI agent that does that, which is really cool. So we'll run this and then I'll show you, a couple of things that you can do that you might find interesting. Because with things like Apollo or SalesNav, your filters are going to be basic. Like there's not that much you can do, but there's not many fractional executives that are going to be using Clay to do their own prospecting. Probably maybe a VP of sales or a CMO might be doing this because they know it already, for example. But if you're a CFO and you're a CTO and you're doing your own outbound prospecting, using Clay and using Clay properly, that'll get you way further ahead than the vast majority of your competitors out there because they simply won't be doing this. So once I have my basic table, if I do add column and then I hit add enrichment, there's tons of different things that I can do. If I want to know data on their website traffic, I can get that. Funding is quite expensive if you do it this way, but you can use AI to get it. and it is a little bit cheaper, or company job openings. That's a cool one. I'm going to show you some sample copy soon. And one of the messages has that as an example. With this kind of technology, in your outreach, you can be saying, I see that you have a head of marketing and you're hiring for a CMO, but you don't have a CRO or whatever it may be. You can talk about their exact team structure and show where you fit in with that, which again is pretty cool. And not a lot of people are doing that. So if you want to use like an AI search, I can say, find all available data on funding, dates, amount, round. I could give more information, hit generate, and then it sculpts the entire prompt in a way more detailed way, um, as you can sort of see here, instead of you having to do it yourself. That'll take a little bit of time to generate, uh, and then you choose the model. So if I go to configure, I can choose which model I want to use. So I can do a really cheap one, GPT 5.1. It only costs zero point 0.8 credits, but it's probably not going to be that good. Obviously, with a search like this, you want it to be checking multiple different sources. So you probably want to use a better model, um, something like 4.5 or 4.6 Sonnet, which was recommended to me the other day. So that's the kind of thing that you can do with Clay. You can get data that previously could have taken you a long time to get yourself. With things like funding, yes, you can get that, from something like Crunchbase, but you can do way more subjective things here. So I can say, tell me which department, let's say it's a list of B2B companies you have here. You can say, tell me which type of or which department and companies they'll be selling to. And then that way you can get that data, you can put into your outreach message. I know you're selling to HR departments. Usually sales teams that do that have XYZ challenges. I've solved this at a different company. You're just getting a level of specificity, a level of curation for every single company you're contacting that really just wasn't capable before, is capable now, but a lot of people still aren't doing it, especially fractional executives, because of course, outbound prospecting is not their game, so most of them are doing average with it. With this kind of stuff, you can really take it to the next level and do targeting, do messaging that is just way better than what others are doing. Um, of course, this is the kind of stuff we're doing on a done for you basis for the clients that we're working with. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. We're on half past right now, but you get the idea. Like if you want to do outbound on your own, play around with Clay, get the free subscription. We're not affiliated with Clay. Um, Play around with it, see what you can do, and honestly, for targeting, it'll be way better than SalesNav, which you might be using right now. So I'll stop it there for the targeting segment of this, and I will get back to the presentation. If you think sort of let's say a targeting or a Clay webinar or masterclass of sorts could be interesting, then you're more than welcome to let us know in the chat or the Q&A, and we can do that in the future. And of course, it would be free as always. All right. Where did the Q and I'm trying to find the Q&A button so that I can see. Okay, cool. Nice. So I've been asked, how do you get to email information? That's a good point. I probably should have covered that. Um, so you can do it native on Clay. There's different when you have your list of leads and you go onto the right to add a column and you do view all enrichments or view all whatever, and then you go to providers. Clay have tons of integrations with like maybe Lead Magic, I'm not sure, but certainly Prospeo. Prospeo is pretty good to get email addresses, and you can do it there, or you can do it externally. So if you, and this is probably what a lot of people do, it works quite well. You can do what you want to do on Clay, export it, get it onto a CSV, and then upload that CSV either to Prospeo or to Scrup. We use a software company in Eastern Europe. There's like three people in the company called Scrup, and there you can also get, or you can see who is an open profile on LinkedIn, and then the people that are open profiles, you can email them, and it doesn't cost one of your 50 credits, which is very cool. So that's another way you can sort of scale your outbound and do more than 50 in-mails a month is by making use of open profiles, which Scrup will give you that data. It sounds like, to be honest, probably a more detailed prospecting webinar could be of good use. But anyway, let's get into outreach messaging. So with tools like Clay and with other tools that you can use tools like Make or Any10 you might have heard of to have different automations which you can link to something, for example, like a Claude API, which is incredibly affordable to basically have a system where you get your prospects from Clay and then you can use AI to get almost any publicly available data that you want on each company and then write based on that. And then you can either write the messaging yourself or use an AI automation again to do that, right? So, you know, who they're selling to, maybe they're selling to HR departments, maybe they're selling direct to consumer, you know, things like that. You can research with AI and then write a message based on that, which if you use it the right way, can really impress someone, you know, like I think you don't want to do outreach that has random personalization, which you probably see already. Like you probably get emails where it's like, I see you do XYZ. Here's my pitch. And there's no correlation, you know. Um, if you're gonna use any of these, you want to talk about why you know that and like what your kind of analysis is or what your solution is to the potential problem that they have, right? We call it sort of the research conclusion analysis slash solution. So like this is the research I've done. I can sort of conclude XYZ based on this. Can I show you how to achieve this? You know, and then that way it's totally flowing, it's not random, and it works pretty well. You can also do things like technology they're using. So that's like widgets or plugins they have for their website, employee count revenue, that's basic, funding, team structure, like I said, is a great one. I'm going to show you a good message that talks about that. If you're a marketer, you can see, are they running Facebook ads? Are they running LinkedIn ads? You know, you can talk about that. You can look at the ads, or you can have AI study the ads and say something about that, which again, not many people do. Works really well. This is kind of what I would say is the forefront of prospecting. The old type of prospecting, really hard to get results. You know, this is what gets results now. This is kind of really the best you can do, you know, because it's combining sort of AI and intelligence and research and making it specific, but you can write the messaging yourself, or you can have your own, you know, snippets that you've wrote that you put into the messaging. Again, of course, everyone that works with us, we do all of this for them. It can be hard to learn all of this stuff. It takes a long time. So if you want someone else to do it for us, feel free to book a meeting. You can also talk about the actual decision maker. So you can study their LinkedIn again with a tool. You don't need to spend hours doing this yourself. Talk about if they're posting or what they posted about, their background, their education, anything. There's a lot of cool things that you can do. Here's a couple of example messages, right? These are just random examples. There's probably parts of them that you like and parts you don't like. Everyone has an opinion on cold outreach. You know, everyone loves to kind of critique different messages. We focus on what works. You know, like if a message is getting us results, we kind of don't listen to the opinions. You know, the results is the main thing. So, Jim, and this is by the way for a fractional CFO. I saw your tiered pricing structure on the website. That's a level of personalization. Do you know which one is profitable or most profitable? I checked your LinkedIn company page and it seems you have a bookkeeper but no CFO. Correct me if I'm wrong. So again, you've done your research, you know, like you've seen that, hey, they could be a good lead for you, but you know, you also don't want to just assume. That's why we're saying, like, correct me if I'm wrong, because you could be realistically. Given you already have two C-suites and you're hiring for a CMO at the moment, I'd guess that bringing in a fractional CFO will be something that's crossed your mind. If so, I'd be happy to show you how I've led finance for similar 2 to 20 to 50 million revenue ad agencies, showing them exactly where their profit is coming from, enabling them to grow their margins while scaling. So everything relates in this message. You know, you've called out the type of company they are, 20 to 50 million revenue ad agencies. You're showing them the outcome. You know, I can show you where your profit is coming from so that you can grow or well, grow profitably, I guess. And it shows that like we've done so much research on them and they actually are a good lead. You know, this isn't random outreach here. That is the kind of thing that does really well, as you can imagine. Um, but this isn't something that you can do for 100 companies in a row. Like the message is going to have to be different. And that's where sort of the skill comes in to actually make it happen. This one was for a fractional general counsel. My research tells me that your company is scaling towards 100 million, or maybe it's already passed it and has a small legal team in place already. So it's like, here's my research. Like, this is why I'm getting in touch. I also saw your team has grown in the past 6 months. You have no new legal hires. That's great research. Like we know that their team is getting bigger, but their legal department hasn't. So I'd assume that your existing legal department might be stretched thin, and having someone with direct GC experience in the B2B creative tech market on a flexible basis may be helpful. So if you just look at that small paragraph, it's like, I know this information about you that makes me a good fit for you. I can make this assumption that or conclusion that's probably correct. It certainly could be. And this is the solution to it. It works really well, as you can imagine. And then what we like to do as well at the bottom there, I'll contact Natasha, your lead GC, about this too. That's just something you don't see in prospecting much. It's like we're going to contact another person in your company in case they're the relevant decision maker. What we find or what we're doing right now is a multi-decision maker approach. So for this company, we're contacting Jody and we're contacting Natasha. We're doing that on LinkedIn and we're emailing them both as well. So that way they're seeing your name twice in one day, unlike all of the other outreach out there. And then the last part at the bottom, I added that just as a sort of cool way of showing the type of research you can do. You know, like that is the extent, that is the level of personalization that is possible now on a more automated basis, um, which is awesome. So yeah. What makes outreach copy work? I've kind of said a lot of the things that do, but the main things that you want to sort of check off when you're writing copy is, does it have authority and credibility? Like, is it making it clear that you are someone they should listen to? Is it relevant to them? Does it state potentially the outcomes that you would solve for them? Does it answer an objection? You know, because usually when people get outreach, they're gonna assume the worst, you know? Like they're gonna assume you can't do that, or well, it's gonna be too expensive, or you know, they're just gonna assume sort of no answer to an objection so that they can skip to the next message and get on with their day. So if you can answer an objection in the message, that helps, and a call to action as well. But ultimately, the three biggest things are, like I said, authority and credibility. You need to be someone that in their mind they should listen to. Does it have your own voice? Like, does it sound like you? If it doesn't, that's a problem. And does it scratch the itch? Like, is there actually a pain point that you could be solving here? Because if there's not, then what's the point, right? It's a waste of time. Um, if you don't want to do what I would call hyper personalized outreach messaging. If you don't want to do stuff that is ultra curated to every company, which by the way is what works the best, then you can have a message like this. This is a company, this is a message that, as you can see, it applies to a whole market. So you could get a targeting list of 100 or 1,000 companies and send this message to all of them, and it's still quite relevant. It's obviously not super personalized because, you know, that's not the process in this example. But this kind of thing can still work. It's obviously a lot easier to do this from a process perspective, but we generally recommend the way I just showed you. If you do want to do outreach messaging, though, where the message is the same for everyone, the biggest thing that you have to lead with is your authority, because they're going to know that you've sent this to a ton of people. Like, they're going to know that, because there's nothing that shows them it's made exactly for them. So if you're going to do that, you have to lead with authority and credibility so that they're thinking, well, yeah, fair enough. This message went to a ton of people, but it's someone I should probably be listening to. It's probably someone that I would like to, have 30 minutes in their calendar, right? So that's a good example that you can use there.
Stuart, if
Uh,
I could just pitch in quickly, because I think it's
sure.
really, really important to highlight the fact that, the whole essence of being a fractional executive brings an element of it's a premium solution, right? And so the messaging that you're sending out has to have a level of sophistication that doesn't damage your reputation, right? So the pitfalls of trying to do this yourself is that often it's the case that it can come across as spammy, for example, or the way in which people try and do outreach, um, and calling it cold outreach for a start, it can be cold and people can spot it straight away, right? But targeted outreach that is specific and has a level of depth to it, I think is the best way of putting it, regardless of how you put these messages together, whether it's the personalized way in which Stuart's able to do with his process, um, or you know, trying to do it yourself. The downside is that if you try and do it yourself in a manual point of view, the amount of time it actually takes to do that effectively and consistently is an opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
So actually having a system that produces this level of personalization is going to be a differentiator as well from a positioning standpoint because you don't want to sound like everybody else does on LinkedIn.
Yeah. 100%. I want to, again, I'm conscious of time, so I want to skip on to offers, um, because at this point we've kind of gone into positioning. Like, I guess the positioning you can call as the foundation, and then prospecting. So at this point, you have leads. What do you do with them? So in terms of structure, there's different ways to pitch the whole fractional exec way of working. These are kind of the three ones that we see most common. Like an initial 3 month engagement. So 3 month minimum commitment, and you're gonna lead marketing or you're gonna lead finance or whatever it may be. Super easy to understand. That's what people do the vast majority of the time, and it works pretty well. It's simple. People understand it. It's pretty good. What you can also do is one-off project leadership. So sometimes when people are going to be in the space where they're going to be hiring a fractional exec, there's maybe there's one specific hurdle they're facing at that time that they need to get sorted first. So if you can just lead that one project, maybe it's going to take 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, depending on what it is. It's a way for them to see what you can do without starting off with you leading a whole department, which is a bigger commitment. So that can be a good way to do it. And then what I've seen one or two people do is a block of a certain amount of hours. I don't typically recommend that. What you would do there is, say your hourly rate is $250 an hour, then you would sell like a block of say 20 hours, and they can just use you like maybe a lot for a week, or they can pace it out, and that's what they've paid for, whether they use it over 2 weeks or 2 months. or whatever. Interesting model, but I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend using it all that much unless you're speaking to a company and you're thinking, you know what, this would be perfect for them. Because a fractional exec on their own doesn't have to have that many clients, we recommend not having set offers, right? So like when you're, especially if you're just getting started or you don't have that many clients, it's not a logistical challenge to have every client on a different sort of basis, you know? Like if the pricing is different across the 3 or 4 clients you have and the amount of hours you're doing is different for each one, it's easy to manage because it's only 3 or 4 clients. But if you're kind of positioning as more of an agency or a partnership where there's a bunch of people in the company, and you're really trying to build it out and bring other people in, that's where we would recommend having set offers. So what we do, I'm not a fractional exec, Finn is, but as a company, the way we work with fractional executives, there's set offers, like you pick which one you want, basically, and they don't change. Um, that works because we're working with, at any given time, let's say at least a dozen people. So you can't really have something different at such a scale, if that makes sense. The good thing about that is it means you can, if you don't have set offers, is you can go into every sales call knowing that you can just make up your offer on the fly, which means it's perfectly curated for the company, which is good. In terms of pricing, we have this. I actually created this a while ago, and I thought it was funny because it goes so against the rational kind of form of how to decide your pricing. But if you look at most fractional execs pricing, it actually correlates to this like quite strongly. Like if you pick any fractional exec and you learn what their hourly pricing is, it will roughly translate to this, usually, like within maybe $50 or so, which I find really funny because it seems very counterintuitive. So basically, every fractional executive is charging at least $100 an hour. And then if you have, say, 20 years of top level experience, add 50 an hour. If you live in one of those 3 cities, add 100. If you work in tech, add 50. If you've had senior roles in the proper, top companies in your industry, add 50. And again, I just find it funny because you would think, and really the way you should do it is to price based on expertise, like price based on the client, like what is the value you can deliver for them. But if you really have no clue where to start, this is a decent map to get started with what your number is. But with that said, you definitely want to learn about the company you're selling to and price based on what is actually realistic for them, to be honest. Any questions about that, let me know. So as I'm saying, you want to price based on perceived value, their client, or sorry, their size and budget. Like typically the bigger companies are going to have more to spend. You may as well take advantage of that. Um, and also your life position. So like what I mean by that is we've worked with fractional execs who they are struggling to get clients, but they're still like demanding this really, really high rate. And sometimes that's just ego. You know what I mean? Like, get some clients in the door, get some traction, get some revenue. And as you get more and more opportunities, your pricing can scale with that. Like it's better to have 1 or 2 clients that maybe aren't paying you exactly what you want, but at least you're getting that initial traction, you're getting that initial revenue. And also on the flip side, if you're doing really well, if you have tons of opportunities, you have no shortage of new clients looking to work with you, take advantage of that. Like put your pricing up. Sometimes even when people have plenty of opportunities, they still have this aversion to increasing their pricing, which is fine if you want to do that, but like if the demand is there, you can increase your price, you know. It's just a bit of a mental challenge, I think, for people sometimes.
Yeah, and Stuart
Uh,
hit the key word there, which is demand, right? So price based on demand. So if you have high demand, then you get to set the pricing, right? If you don't have like proof of concept or market validation that you are in demand, then essentially, you need to price based off of what people are willing to pay to an extent. But that's a good kind of rule of thumb to follow.
yeah. And since we're coming up on time, send in any questions that you have and want to get answered. I'm chuffed with how many people have stuck around so long. So any questions you have, put them in the chat, and we will, or put them in the Q&A, and we will get to them. For guarantees and downsells, so this is an interesting one. I think fractional execs don't think about guarantees and downsells really anywhere near as much as they should, to be honest. There's some good guarantees you can have. You can't, and with guarantees, the thing to bear in mind is you can't control external factors. You can't, but you can control how you react to them. You know what I mean? And so you can put that, call it reaction process in your guarantee, right? So some good examples of this, a 0 day notice. So that makes it so much easier for a client to start working with you. Because if at any time they don't want to continue, they can do that. It was a fractional CFO that said he did that. And it was the first time I heard it, I was like, that's incredible. I can't believe you do that. But it just makes it so much easier for people to work with them because they can stop at any time. You obviously want to set realistic expectations there, like what is realistic to be done in month two or month one versus two versus three. But it just makes it so much easier for the client to actually start working with you. You can do the first couple of hours free for them to get a taste of you. You can do a 7 or a 14 day initial withdrawal period. So if they sign up on one day, on day one, but then something happens on day 4 or 5 or 10, then they can stop, within the first week or the first 2 weeks, which is a good way to do it. And you can also guarantee certain deliverables, so it's like you can't always guarantee the outcomes of those deliverables. Like you can't control the world, but you can control yourself, so that way they at least know they're getting XYZ thing when they work with you. So some good stuff that you can use there. Actually, the thing I missed there is what you want to do from a perception perspective is always mention your guarantees or any bonuses after you say the price to someone. Because what happens is if you're speaking to a lead and you say, this is kind of what I'm going to do, and this is the price, they will kind of associate those things all at a similar value, right? So if you say I'm going to do all these things and it's going to cost $7,000 a month, they're going to see it as roughly worth $7,000 a month. And then when you say the guarantee or the bonuses on top of that, now your thing is worth more than that, and it makes it a good deal. Whereas if you say your guarantees or bonuses before you say the price, then when you say that 7,000 number, they're including the guarantee and bonus within the value. So it makes your whole thing seem worth 7,000. So I learned that from Alex Ramosi. I thought it was really interesting. If you've never read $100 Million Offers by Alex Ramosi, I would definitely recommend it. And then for downsells, you can do a 1 day strategy or audit. So like let's just do 1 day together and the goal is to achieve XYZ. Smaller commitment, easier for people to say yes. You can do a ramp up offer. That's very good if people want to do something in the future. So it's really annoying when you speak to a lead and they're like, I want to work with you, but the timing isn't right. It's like, well, let's ramp it up. You know what I mean? Like if you don't have the time for this or you don't have the money for it, like let's start on a smaller version, get some quick wins, and then scale it up over time. Again, anything you can do to get your foot in the door works pretty well. Or you can do advisory. Pretty simple. It's kind of the mini version of being a fractional exec. You're advising instead of leading on something. And then sales process. I appreciate I'm going through this very quickly, but we're almost out of time. Um, Again, you have your leads now, you've got interest, you've put to meeting. What are you going to do with that? First sales meeting, we recommend like using it to provide value, show your credibility, learn about them, they can learn about you, and then get them onto a second meeting. So always book a meeting from a meeting. Have a second meeting where you kind of walk them through your offer. At that point, they should already be excited to hopefully work with you from that first meeting. Pitch, answer objections, and then get a close after that. Schedule the onboarding call. We always recommend, and this is what we do ourselves, always get the onboarding call booked before they've paid you and signed. Because if it's Monday and we say, yep, let's do this week, and you get the onboard meeting for Friday, scheduled for Friday, then they have in their mind, okay, I have to pay and I have to sign the agreement before Friday. Whereas if you don't set that meeting, it's so easy for them to think, oh, I'll do it next week, and I'll push it down the line. And objection handling, I think we've kind of ran out of time. But we can go into it, and if you have to hop off and maybe watch this at a later date, then no worries at all. Um, so if you are hopping off right now for your next meeting or something, hope you've enjoyed this. Feel free to let us know in the Q&A what your thoughts were. If you would like to see more of something, you're more than welcome to ask, and we will certainly do that. Anything you want to mention, Finn, before we go on to objection handling?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, we could probably go into a lot more depth with each of the topics that we've covered today. This just gives you an overview of essentially the process from A to B, but certainly, around the sales element of things, certainly around the prospecting side of things, there are details and depths that we haven't been able to go into today because it's just impossible, right? But we're more than happy to do a deep dive type session. So, if anybody would benefit from that, you can email me or Stuart. So you've got Stuart, Stewart, at fractionalclients.com, or you can email me, Finn, Finn, at fractionalclients.com as well. And, we're interested in any feedback. We want to make this as informative as possible. And we'll be happy to, cater to what the demand is out there.
Yeah. Um, so I have a couple of people saying that they've enjoyed it. That's great. A couple of people saying to keep going. We will do that. We have a question. Is it better to share your proposal slash pricing in a meeting versus emailing it as a follow-up? That's a great question. Finn might have his own thoughts. My thought is definitely to do it on the meeting. I would do it on the second meeting, like always. And my reasoning is no one wants to hear a proposal that they haven't asked for or aren't interested in. So don't like shove the pricing or the proposal in their face soon because they're not going to be interested. You got to make sure there's a level of interest there first. And then that's why I would book a second meeting with them. Make sure you've got them in the calendar a few days later for another meeting. And then you show it there. Because what you can then do is, I mean, think about these two options, right? If you say to them in that first call, okay, I'll email you the proposal or the pricing, emails get lost. Like, you know what I mean? They're going to see it. They're going to want to go on to the next email. They're probably going to skim through it really quickly, and then think, okay, maybe I'll think about it more deeply later. You're kind of putting them in control of the decision-making process, which you generally don't want to do. You want to keep control. Whereas if you say to them in that first meeting, let's have another call. In the meantime, right, I'm going to put together a really cool proposal for you, walk through exactly what you're going to get, how it's going to work, the outcomes we can reasonably expect, um, what it's going to cost, and it's all going to be ultra tailored to you. All right. That way, hopefully, there's going to be a level of excitement from them to see it. You schedule the meeting for Friday, and hopefully they're thinking, oh, I can't wait until Friday and I can see what's going to be in this proposal. And then when they go on to the meeting, you have their full attention. and you can guide them through the information in the way that you want to guide them. I mean, look at this presentation. If I had emailed this to you, you kind of skim through it and be like, okay, like cool, whatever. But you're on it live. I'm talking you through it, like you're getting way more from it. You're probably way more engaged than if you just saw it on an email. So I guess the short answer for you there is always do it on a meeting versus emailing it as a follow-up. Hopefully that helps.
If I could give you a little bit of a different insight into this, speaking from a fractional executive point of view, what I would recommend is you want to disqualify early. All right. So even mentioning your pricing from a high level point of view, rather than pricing the project on the call. All right. What's really useful is to say what is typical of your working engagements and give them a range. Pricing can be from this to this. If it's outside of budget, there's no point in taking that second meeting. You're saving yourself the time. Okay. The second part, and this is a general rule that I use, is that unless somebody is interested or shows intent towards working with you, do not send them a proposal. The amount of time it takes to put together a well curated and detailed proposal is time you're never going to get back. So wait until you've actually got a verbal yes and then put it across in writing. That would be my recommendation when it comes to sending proposals.
Interesting. I think, yeah, I would agree that you don't want to waste time putting anything together if you don't think there is a reasonable level of interest. So I guess with everything I'm saying there, it's under the assumption that you know they're interested, and you know that it's not going to be a waste of time to actually spend time on it. I think I would certainly agree with you, Finn, that mentioning your general, range of pricing early is a good idea if there's a question of budget, like if there's a reasonable chance that they're not going to be able to afford it or it's just not going to be viable, then I would agree. But if you know, because of the size of the company, because of whatever you know about the company, if you know that it is doable and your pricing isn't going to be a shock to them, then that's not needed as much because they're already more qualified. You know what I mean?
100%, yeah, 100%. And there is kind of nuance around this in terms of, the ability to read the situation is like not everything's going to be relevant in every single call that you do, right? These are kind of general rules of thumb that can apply a bit well across the board. What's really good about, if you do decide to come and work with us directly, is we can actually give you like a pre or post sales call review in which we can actually kind of tell you like, what to say, what way to position your pricing based on the client and that kind of thing as well. Because this is such a general kind of webinar, is that some things apply in some cases, whereas they might not apply in others, right? There's no one thing that applies all of the time, generally speaking. All right. So take everything that you're kind of getting on this with a bit of a grain of salt as well, in terms of like, the famous kind of expert response to every question is it depends, right? Is the actual answer. We're just giving you as much insight as possible into what the kind of options are and what can be effective.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Let's go on to how to answer objections. So, my thought is sometimes it's a waste of time to answer objections. Like if someone is, and I don't know, I guess this is my own personal theory from being in sales. If someone asks no questions and they're just ready to go instantly, that's a red flag. Like that's weird. Like there should be some level of question asking, because they're going to be paying you money. Like they need to be, fairly confident in their decision. But on the flip side of that, if they're asking 1,000,001 questions, it's probably a bad fit as well. You know what I mean? Because the more and the more and the more questions they ask, sometimes it just shows you that their tolerance of risk is on the floor. And with any hire, like with any investment there's a level of risk, you know? So like we've had a couple of leads for our own business that they ask so many questions and they want so many revisions to the contract. It's like, I just know you're going to be a bad fit. You know what I mean? Because life is uncertain. And if something at all doesn't go exactly to plan, you're going to have a meltdown. I can just tell because you have no tolerance for risk. So you want them to be, I guess, in that mid-level where they have some questions, a reasonable amount, but like not too many. I appreciate that it's vague, but hopefully it's helpful. Be prepared for them. Like you should probably know roughly what they're going to be. And it doesn't take many sales calls to get the same ones coming up over and over again. Um, what we also recommend you do is incorporate them into your marketing, like because objections, you only hear the objections that people actually say, like a lot of the time people are gonna, before they're on the meeting with you, maybe they've looked at your website or they've looked at your LinkedIn or whatever. An objection is going to come into their mind and they're going to assume the worst, right? So a lot of the time it's that way, for example, with pricing. Maybe they look at your LinkedIn profile and they just assume that you're going to be like really expensive, or maybe they just assume that you're not going to have the experience that they need. So then they don't respond to you, and you never hear the objection. So the objections that you do hear, you want to answer them in your marketing and your sales materials, and then you're actually going to get more leads that way. All right, and be honest about them. Like that's the thing. Usually objections are fair, and sometimes there's not a great answer. Be honest, like if they expect you to give a perfect answer to every objection, again, they're probably a bad fit, because that's just unrealistic. But if they can ask you a question that you're like, well, you're right, like that could happen, maybe you have some data on the likelihood of it happening, how often it happens, what happens if it happens, the honesty, I think, with reasonable, rational people goes a long way. The most common objections that fractional CXOs get are cost, not understanding the model. That's less common now than it was a couple of years ago. We already have someone, timing, and delay in ROI. So to go into them with cost, there's two types of cost objections, right? There's the actual cost, and then there's the value associated with it. So you want to figure out which one is it? Like, do they actually not have the money in the company's bank account? Usually it's not going to be that way, because you're going to be selling to companies that have funding or they have revenue. Like you're not selling to a consumer that could be struggling to pay rent. Like it's a different market. So it's typically going to be a value question, not a cost question. Like they're going to have the money. So if it is value, you have to communicate the value more. You know what I mean? One of the best ways to do that is to communicate the cost of the pain. Like if you're coming in to solve a problem, what is it going to cost them if they don't solve the problem? It's probably going to be way more than you're asking for. It's probably going to be more than your price. So they have these two alternatives. Like they pay the smaller cost now, or they pay the bigger cost later. You want to pay the smaller cost now. So that's the best way to deal with the cost question, I would say. Non-understanding of the model, well, pretty self-explanatory. You just need to explain it. Sometimes you'll hear like, we already have someone, like we have a head of marketing. Why do we need a CMO? For things like that, it's like, well, why did you get in the call? You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be an issue. If you can, and this is why I said, like, having an offer of just leading a certain project can be good to get your foot in the door because you're solving a smaller problem, you're showing your value, you're showing how knowledgeable and, expert you are. And then that kind of provides the basis to go into a bigger engagement. Um, in terms of timing, I think the majority of the time you get a timing objection, it's basically a cop out. and it's not actually a question of timing. It's a deflection because they sort of basically don't want to make a decision. Like they either don't have the information they need to make a decision, or they're just, I guess, scared to make the decision. And if they're scared to make the decision, it's because they haven't figured out like what realistically is probably going to happen if I go forward with this versus if I don't. You know what I mean? So if it's a timing objection, like I said, a lot of the time it's not an objection, it's a deflection. And they need more information. Sometimes that's around onboarding. Like it's hard to say yes to something if you don't know what the first one, two, three steps are going to be. Um, so again, like a lot of objections, when you hear them, the first step isn't necessarily to answer the objection, it's to figure out what actually is the objection. Like sometimes it takes multiple questions to actually know the core of it. Because it's so easy with timing to be like, well, this might make more sense in 3 months. Like that's just so easy to say, and it means you don't have to go through the emotion or not the emotional, the kind of the logic and the challenge of making a decision, which takes brain power. If it is genuinely bad timing, can you change the offer to make it something that fits their timing? Like maybe 6 months from now is going to be the best time to hire a fractional CMO, but what are the steps that you can put in place now for them that are gonna, get them to that time sooner? So if it genuinely is a question of timing, can you change the offer to fit their current state? And with the delay in ROI, so that's more true for things, for example, like partnerships leader. Like it can take way longer to get to actually get the result and ROI from that. It's one of those things, like the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is now. Like if you're looking long term, the best time is now. Um, and also, can you show them what the quick wins are going to be? Because maybe they're not going to make a direct ROI for a good few months, but what can they get in the short term that's going to be useful? You can probably think of something that's going to be really useful to them in the short term that you can, tell them that they're going to get. Um, One of the or two of the really cool sort of answers or things that you can say, and this is stuff that you can use like today on sales calls, is a lot of my past clients have said that or been in that position. And then also that's actually why a lot of my previous clients ended up moving forward. So you're really switching the objection. Like people see an objection or a question that they're asking as a reason, let's say, not to move forward. This way, you're totally flipping it. And now, because they've asked that, it's a reason to move forward. So you're showing them with that first one, like the people that have worked with us before, they asked that or they were in that same position, and that's why they moved forward because they had XYZ challenge, they had a certain uncertainty, whatever it may be. So those are really cool things that you can use, as soon as possible in your sales calls, to get more clients, basically.
Yeah. Can I just pitch in here, Stuart? Because there's a couple
Yeah.
of things that I think would be really useful for people to take away. So the ROI question, like a lot of people like tie return of investment to financial results, for example, but there's an immediate ROI as well, right? And the better that you can articulate and talk about the immediate ROI, so things like, well, you hire me now, it means you're going to have somebody that's more skilled than anybody else that you currently have in your organization at the moment to take responsibility for the things that you need going forward, so you're not shouldering or carrying that weight yourself. All right, that's a return of investment right there because that's an emotional return of investment. Okay. It's not just about the tangibles in terms of like the revenue projections and that kind of thing. There's always going to be an emotional ROI. So being able to articulate and talk about those things is going to really serve you in those objection handling situations. There's another thing that you mentioned before, Stuart, that I'd like to touch on, which is if somebody's scared of moving forward, so they're not making a decision, the ability to actually kind of navigate that, because not making a decision is still making a decision, right? Being able to highlight what the opportunity cost is by not making a decision now is going to be a great way of overcoming that, because there's actually a greater fear of missing out on this current opportunity, right? Because that's the thing, is that the people that don't move forward the fastest are the ones that are the indecisive ones. They are the ones that kind of sit around waiting for things to be perfect. But the thing is that everything is a risk, right? So being able to actually, and it's not about manipulating people into saying yes. It's about, if it's a good fit and the risk is a calculated risk and it's worth taking, helping them kind of navigate that thought process. Because if you're able to do that and make that easier for them, they're going to trust you when it comes to difficult decisions within their organization.
Yeah, very true. In terms of marketing and sales materials, if you're an individual fractional exec, then a website is good, but it's never the like it's never the a critical thing, let's say. Like we've had people that have started working with us and they have a huge, like really cool website that probably cost many thousands of dollars to build, but they're really struggling, you know. And we've also seen people that have no website. Maybe they even have a really basic LinkedIn profile, but they're killing it. Like they're doing really well with their work. So I think the expectation, at least, is if you're an individual, a pitch deck is enough. Like if you have a one-page website, great. You know, that's not going to take away. Um, but a pitch deck is all you necessarily need, I would say. And I think you definitely should have a pitch deck instead of a proposal. Whereas if you're positioning as an agency or a more of an established business, let's say, then I would definitely recommend having a website as well. That's just my take. But you know, if you're trying to get new clients and you're struggling, the answer isn't building a website. You know what I mean? Like the answer is probably one of the five things we've talked about today: positioning, targeting, messaging, offers or sales process. And depending on where the breakdown is, you know, that's what needs fixed. Like if you're generating interest, you're getting people onto meetings and they're the right types of leads, but you can't close them. Well, then it's probably a sales process or an offer thing. You know, if you can't get people onto the meeting in the first place, then it's one of the first three, you know, targeting, positioning, or messaging. Um, so yeah.
If I
Uh,
can pitch in here, Stuart, because I think it'd
yeah.
be useful for people to understand, what the problem is typically around this is a lot of people get busy building, right? Which can essentially be an avoidance tactic in terms of putting off what they're most scared of, right? Because sometimes an element of a fear of failure. Like if I speak to somebody, am I going to get rejected and that kind of thing. Before building becomes like the priority or the next step, the one thing you need to make sure that you're having is enough conversations, right? Because without having enough conversations, it doesn't matter about anything else, right? The whole point of having a website is to strengthen the conversations that you're already having, right? So by prioritizing having more conversations, you can't get selling opportunities without initial conversations, right? So if you focus on scaling the amount of conversations that you're having first, then deal with the building and building things in the right order after the fact.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that you want to communicate in your marketing, your sales materials, whether it's your LinkedIn or your website or pitch deck, is the authority and the credibility that you have. Like that is the biggest thing. Like if there's only one thing that is kind of critical or important, it is showing off your credibility and your authority. Because there's a lot of people out there that they might have no website, they might have a basic LinkedIn, they might have never thought about sales process. Offer is just whatever they happen to be offering. They could be doing zero outbound prospecting, but they're doing really, really well because of their credibility and their authority. It's like, you know, probably. adjacent to positioning, it's like the most important thing. Certainly either first or second, let's say. So show the companies you've worked with, like show your previous client or company names, the success stories, like case studies. Um, are they easy for people to see? Stats, maybe you achieved a 40% increase on something in a 6 month period. Achievements like testimonials. What have other people said about you? A lot of people, I think, totally underutilize their LinkedIn recommendations. They're easy to get. Like if you've worked with a bunch of people that have been happy with your work, which will be the case if you're a fractional exec, then, ask them for a testimonial, ask them to write something on your LinkedIn. Um, it makes a world of difference and it's so easy. Um, so yeah, these things are super important. For a website, we kind of recommend this structure more than anything. So in that initial like sort of hero image, like the first thing they see, what is the outcome you're solving? Who are you doing it for? And can you solve an objection within that? So obviously who you're targeting, that means that when someone comes onto the website and they're part of that group, then they're thinking, okay, this website is made for me. With the outcome, you're showing them that you can take them to where you want to be. So they're thinking, of course, subconsciously, this is for me, and this can help me go to where I want to be. And then, that, like I said earlier, people will sometimes look at your stuff and assume certain things. Like an objection will come into your mind, into their minds. They'll assume the worst, and then they'll click away. So they'll think, yeah, cool, but it's probably really expensive, or it's probably not going to work for me for some random reason, or whatever it may be. So if you can solve a common objection there, then that can work really well. And then because of the importance of authority and credibility, as I just said, I would always have that as the second thing, and you see that so common in websites now. It's like, here is the hero image, and then here are some logos or some testimonials. And I think that's the best way to do it. That's what we do on the Fractional Clients website as well. And then about you, outcomes, process, call to action. These are a little bit more interchangeable, sure. Probably the first two are the more important ones, but this is certainly what we recommend. Um, for a website, the thing to bear in mind is the website, it's not like a conversion thing. You know what I mean? That's why process is so low down. Process of how you achieve something is more going from like mid funnel to bottom of funnel, like from consideration to conversion stage. Your website isn't doing that. It's typically going to be awareness to consideration. That's why it's like these first two or three things are the most important that you want to prioritize at the top. For a pitch deck, it's a little bit different because you're taking them from that consideration stage to conversion. Like, they're interested, they know you. Can you get them to move forward? That's why the testimonials and results are less important in a pitch deck because they've already seen them, probably. Like they're already interested. They already know, like, and trust you to a certain extent. Like shoving more general testimonials and results in their face is going to be less important at this stage. It could be very important if it's very specific and relevant to them. So it's like, hey, here's this one company that was really similar to you, then that's important. But more generalized testimonials from this consideration to conversion stage is going to be less important. So again, about you, outcomes, process a lot higher up here. Timeline, onboarding, pricing, a kind of reminder that you're credible, and then next steps. You don't have to follow this exactly, but if you're thinking that you want to put together a pitch deck and you don't know where to start, I would certainly start with this. Everyone that works with us gets access to pitch deck templates and website templates that you can use, as soon as they sign up. Of course, if you're interested in learning about more, if you're interested in learning more about what we do, visit the website, book a call, uh, you know, whatever, and we'll chat to you and see if it's a fit to work together. And the final kind of closing notes with regards to sales process, number one, bam, fam, book a meeting from a meeting. Super important. Um, like when you have that first meeting, if there is a reasonable level of interest, get a second meeting booked. Ask them to open their calendar. When would be another good time to meet? Try to avoid just sending your Calendly or whatever afterwards. Like it takes 30 seconds to coordinate another meeting on that first meeting. Um, so obviously if they're a crap lead and they're a waste of time, then don't do that. But if you want things to progress, book a meeting from that first meeting. When it comes to follow-ups, because any of you that have ever had leads know that sometimes they just go quiet. Uh, and this is actually something I learned from you, Finn. You want to provide reasoning in the follow-up as much as possible. Sometimes you can't always do that, you know. But if you can tell them that you're following up because you have something new to show them, or like the timing right now, for whatever reason, it's perfect. Maybe you work with e-commerce companies and, there's a certain amount of months until Black Friday. Maybe you're raising your prices. So if they sign up before X date, then they get the good price. Don't do that artificially. You want to be legit about it. But it's a good way to get people to respond. And like people actually like giving advice. People like being helpful. Sometimes you can flip the script and tell them that you want to get their thoughts on something. You want to get their help on something. You'd be surprised how often people are happy to give their time just to be a help. Um, so yeah. And another thing is, and this is a bit more conceptual, sometimes people will kind of fall off the radar and stop responding to you. And the natural response is to follow up with them as if they're in the same stage of the sales process that they were, right? So what I mean by that is like if you're trying to schedule a follow-up meeting, but they're not responding, don't try and follow up to get them back on that meeting or on another meeting. If you've already sent a follow-up like once or twice for them to schedule a meeting, take it back a step, like just follow up to get a response, like just ask a question that they can send maybe even just a yes or no response to. And then that way you've just re-engaged them. Like again, you've got that foot in the door for the conversation, but then afterwards you can get them back to where they were in the sales process initially. So I appreciate that's a little bit more conceptual, but whatever. Iterate fast and make sure you track your leads. So we recommend, or I recommend personally, Trello. Notion is really cool, but it's a little bit more uh, complicated, so let's say as a setup. So if you want to get started on a free lead tracker CRM, Trello is second to none because it's so intuitive, it's so simple. For everyone we work with, we use Notion, but that's because we've already built out our own system. If you want to save yourself the hassle of doing that, then use Trello. But anyway, this is the presentation done, all 34 slides. So, Finn, anything you want to go into before we close off? And if anyone has any final questions, now is the time to ask them before we finish.
No, I think we've covered a lot in a relatively short space of time. I think what would probably be useful for people is to know where they can reach out to us if they would like to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on this, you probably know us in some way, shape, or form. So the website, of course, is fractionalclients.com. You can learn more about our process and what we do for people on the website, or just book a call. Like book a call, it's 30 minutes long. Ask us anything you want. If you don't already follow me and Finn on LinkedIn, I would recommend doing that. We're going to be posting this to YouTube, and we'll also post a bunch of case studies. So we have one case study up. It was about a fractional CMO that we landed 3 clients in 90 days, just like this title. But we're going to be putting way more case studies up there on, fractional CFOs, CTOs, whatever, the messaging we used, like the exact things we did. So yeah, look up Stuart Masson on YouTube and subscribe, and you'll see all of that stuff. And yeah, it'd be cool to hear from you soon. And if we can work together, then that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I can just leave us with one thing, and I kind of touched on it before. If you are in a situation where you have stagnated or you're looking for the next step and that kind of thing, is indecision is making a decision. You're going to stay exactly where you are, for as long as it takes for something to change, right? And I think it was the Dalai Lama that said, things don't change until you do. All right, so it might be worth even having a conversation with us because there might be something that we say that ignites some kind of inspiration or excitement as to what the next step is, and we'd love to support you on your journey, even if it just means answering a few simple questions for you.
Yeah, very much so. Well, for everyone that stuck around this long to the end, a whole hour and a half, thank you so much. Hope you found it useful. Keep tuned in on email, LinkedIn, whatever. Like if we do another one of these, which we will, probably on a certain subject, then yeah, we would love to see you here again. So thanks for tuning in. See you on the next one. Bye bye.
Bye.